Can all of you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Diksha. Thank you, Ankit. Uh, so in the last class, we were discussing all about the given goods and inferior goods and stuff. So is there any questions on that regarding anything, concept on numericals or anything that we did in the last class? Okay. So I think I can take that as a no. So today we will start a new topic, which is our gains from trade. Now today I think I can see quite some new names over here. So is there anyone today who's this is the first class, first microeconomics class, or you're attending my class for the first time? Is there anyone like that over here?
Sir, I am.
Okay, Ayushi, this is the first class, right? You're Sem 1 Micro, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, got it. So today we will be starting with the topic of gains from trade. Now, before actually going in for some detailed description of what we are talking about, let me just start with a quick example so that we can understand easily. So let's write down a kind of numerical, so to say, and then I'll illustrate that what essentially I am trying to talk about. Okay, so consider two individuals, capital 1 and capital 2, producing two goods, X and Y, and are endowed with 24 hours in a day. Each individual setup can be summarized as follows. And let's draw a small table over here. So on top, let's say we have good X, capital Y, and over here we have individual 1 and individual 2. This is 3 hours, this is 3 hours, 2 hours, and this is 1 hour. How do we interpret these? Let's say we are talking of this first element, 3 hours. I mean to say that to produce 1 unit of good X, individual 1 will require 3 hours of time. Okay. And likewise, we will be interpreting everything else. So now the question is that if the individuals 1 and 2 are producing only these two goods with these specific time units, then is there any benefit that they would get from trading the goods among themselves? because not only they are producing these two goods X and Y, they are also consuming these two goods. That means their utility also depends upon their consumption levels. So if they are not trading, then whatever they are producing, that is what they will be consuming, right? But if they can actually trade their productions among themselves, then can we achieve a better outcome for both the individuals? This is the kind of scenario that we are talking about. Now, this gains of trade can be between two individuals, like I've mentioned in the question. It can be between two industries, two firms, or even at a broader level across countries as well. The idea will remain the same. The crux of the matter is what we want to understand is there any benefit that the two parties would get by trading their some of their production units among themselves to achieve a better outcome? That is what we are essentially trying to understand. So this is the kind of a setup that we are talking about. Now, through this example, we will try to see that how we will try to solve these kind of questions, or what are the kind of ideas that we will get from this. Now, let's talk about individual one first. The total amount of time that they available with individual 1 and 2, both are 24 hours. So if the individual 1 spends 3 hours for 1 unit of x, then it if he produces 3x amount of x, then this is the total amount of time he spends on good x, plus 3 times y would be the total amount of time that he would spend on producing the total amount of good y. So this is his total time spent in producing x and y. Correct. Given that he has only 24 hours, that means this 3x plus 3y should always be less than equals to 24, right? This is the production condition of good one. Production condition of individual one. Correct? Is this clear to all of you? Any questions on this? Now, similarly, can someone tell me what will be the similar production criteria for individual two next? If anyone can just give it a try, what will happen?
So 2x plus y less than
2x
equals
plus
to
y is less than or equal to 24.
24. 2x plus y is less than or equals to 24. So this is the production condition. Okay. Now, if we try to plot these two, how will these come up to? How can we plot these? Anyone? You must have seen this kind of setups earlier. How can we plot these two lines? If we are taking capital X on the horizontal axis and capital Y on the vertical axis, how can we plot these? X over here, Y over here. How can we do that? The first thing that we should do is to consider this inequality in the equality form, right? If you remember, if you have done it in LPP maybe somewhere. So for individual one, we have 3x plus 3y is less than equals to 24. That means x plus y is less than equals to 8. If you consider in equality form, what is this? X plus y is equals to 8. Correct. So that means, can anyone tell me with this line, what is my x-intercept with this line? X plus y equals to 8. What is my x-intercept?
So 8 units.
8 units. And what would be the y-intercept?
Sir, 8 units.
8 units. So this will be 8 and 8. And similarly for individual 2, again the similar procedure. We will consider it in equality form. So 2x plus 4 is equals to 24. So this will give us what? What is my x coordinate now?
Sir, 12.
12. So somewhere over here. And what is the y coordinate here?
24.
24. So if you join these two lines, this is for individual 1 and this is for individual 2. Correct. So this total inequality for individual 1 is this entire space out here. Correct. This is all possible points that the individual 1 can produce given his capacity. And similarly for individual 2, the entire shaded area, this one, becomes the production possibilities for individual 2. Any point in the shaded region can be a production level for individual 1, sorry, individual 2. Correct. So this one is known as the, I hope some of you might remember this term, we have discussed this earlier, the production possibility frontier of individual 1. In short, we will be writing it as the PPF. So this is my PPF1 and this is my PPF2. Okay. So this is basically, this graph tells me about the entire production possibility that the individual. All right. So this is the first part of the story. Now, now let's consider if both the individuals are spending their entire 24 hours amongst the production of these two goods, then the production points will lie only on this line, correct? If they're using up this entire 24 hours that they have without wasting any, then all possible production points will be lying on the straight line and not inside, correct? And that means we are only bothered about the points which are on the line, because any point which we are considering inside the shaded region are points where you are actually not using up your entire 24 hours and you are not producing to your full efficiency. Therefore, for maintaining your efficiency, if you are spending your entire 24 hours distributed between your production of good X and production of good Y, that you are producing at points which are on the PPF. Okay. So this is the first thing that we will do. Therefore, for efficiency, you can make note of this. For efficiency, we assume that both the individuals make full use of their available time. Hence, the possible production points are only the ones on the PPF. That is the straight line. Okay. So this is the first thing. All right. Now, essentially, if you understand this concept, this very much looks like a budget line, right? There are two goods on two axes, and we have basically drawn a straight line, which basically now gives me the production possibilities. That means what are the possible XY combinations that the two individuals can produce. Now coming to the question of, since we have been given these two equally, now does anyone remember that what did the slope of the budget line imply to all of us over here? Let's take individual one for instance. The PPF now becomes x plus y is equals to 8. Okay, what does this mean? If you differentiate it, you would be getting the slope of the PPF, which is dx plus dy is equals to 0. That means dy by dx is equals to -1. Correct? Which can be written in this manner: dy is equals to minus dx, isn't it? Now have a look at this. What we are essentially talking about, it kind of repeat of the idea of budget line that we have spoken earlier. If you wish to increase your production of y by 1 unit, then you should sacrifice 1 unit of good x, right? I request all of you to reply with a yes or a no if you understand this. Let me repeat it once more. Dy by dx equals to -1 or dy equals to minus dx. What does it mean? If you wish to increase your production of good y by 1 unit, then you should reduce your production of good x by 1 unit. That means you have to give up on the production of 1 unit of x in order to produce an extra unit of y. Right? Can all of you reply with a yes or a no if you understood what I just said?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So does anybody remember the actual term that we used when we were discussing budget line for this kind of a setup? What is the slope of the budget line known as? There was a term that we used.
Marginal
Does
rate
it-
of substitution.
No, Hina, that's for the indifference curve, right? For the budget line, this is the relative price
Yeah,
of
relative.
good X, right? In order to produce an extra unit of Y, you have giving up certain unit of X. So the price that you pay is basically the amount that you give up. Okay, got it. So this is nothing but, so the slope is the relative price of X. Okay, and let me just write down the interpretation once more over here. Always remember that whenever you're drawing the PPF, the slope of the PPF is nothing but the relative price of the good that you have taken on the horizontal axis, not the vertical one. Okay, let me write down the interpretation over here once more. Similarly, if we want to produce an extra unit of good X, then individual one has to sacrifice 1 unit of good Y. This is the relative price of X in terms of good Y. Okay. Now, similarly, can someone tell me what will be the relative price of good X for individual 2? This is my PPF. 2x plus y equals to 24. Can someone quickly tell me what it is coming out to be?
So minus half.
-2.
minus 2. So that means your dy by dx is coming out to be minus 2, right? How are we going to interpret this? Anyone? How can we write the interpretation for this?
If we want to produce 1 unit of good y, good x, we have to sacrifice 2 unit of good y.
Exactly. So the relative price of good x is 2 in terms of good y. Okay, let's write that down once again so that we have the clarity over here. So this is the relative price of good x in terms of good y. That is, the individual has to sacrifice 2 units of y to produce an extra unit of x. Okay, so this is the entire idea. Now, if we just come back to this graph once more, and let me just rub out a little bit of these shaded areas that we have drawn. Yeah. So that means the PPF for individual 2 is steeper than the PPF of individual 1, right? What does it mean? The relative price of good X for individual 2 is higher than that of individual 1. That means individual 2 has to sacrifice more amount of Y to produce an extra unit of X as compared to um, individual 1, right? Now, if the individuals are not actually trading amongst themselves, then they have to decide upon their consumption point. So their consumption point will depend upon the price level that they are having amongst themselves. Now think of this. Although I have not mentioned any specific price that is there in the market for these two goods, isn't this relative price of good X the price that they're imposing upon themselves? Isn't it? Let me repeat what I just said. Might be something new. Although I have not specifically mentioned any market price of good X or good Y over here, but this relative price that we have just discussed right now, isn't it the relative price, the price that they are imposing upon themselves as the relative price of good X in terms of good Y? That will be their main driver in the production process, correct? Is this clear to all of you? Any questions?
Sir,
Yes.
sir, I have a doubt. What you just said, does it mean that in the good Y, they have to sacrifice 2 unit of good X, so that is why they are considering, and on the other side, they have to sacrifice 1 unit of good X, so good X will be considered or imposed upon themselves. Is it like that?
No, Hina. No, 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 no. It is something like saying that when you're having the production process split between two goods X and Y, you need to decide upon the production point, right? Where will you produce? That is, this line that we have drawn over here, this graph over here is basically giving your production possibility, correct? The production
Right.
possibility. So now the question is that how much, if they are not agreeing on trading, whatever they will produce, that is exactly what they will consume. Then that decision of how much to produce will depend upon the price of the goods, plain and simple, that we have learned. Now, since in this part, at least for now, since I have not given you any market price of the two goods, then the relative price that we just discussed over here, is it some kind of a opportunity cost that they have due to their technology or due to their production process, whatever may be, but they have imposed upon themselves, right? This is the opportunity cost that they have to bear. That is a part of their production process. Correct. The relative price of good X is nothing but the opportunity cost of good X, isn't it? So that is why I'm saying that this price that we are just discussed, or the relative price, is some kind of a price that they have imposed upon themselves. Not that they have done it intentionally, but it is a part of their production process or something like that. That this is a price that is there relevant, plain and simple over here. All
Okay, sir.
right, that is what
Yes.
it is. All right. Now comes another question that I wanted to tell you, that let's say we are talking of individual one. When I am writing dy by dx as minus 1, I am interpreting this as the relative price of good x. Right? Is there any way that we can from here interpret the relative price of good y as well? Is it possible?
Sir, will it be dx by dy?
That should be right. If dy by
Yeah,
dx is slope relative price of good x, then dx by dy would be the relative price of good y,
yes,
isn't it? That's how it
yes.
should go, isn't it? So let's take note of these two situations once more. Let's say I'm talking of good x. The relative price for individual one is how much? It's 1. Don't put the minus because we know that it will be minus. And for individual 2, how much it is? It is 2. Coming to good y, what is the relative price for
One.
individual 1 then? It continues to be 1.
One.
And what would be the relative price for individual 2? Sorry, I've made an
Half.
error. Half. Correct. 1 by 2. Just inverting it. Now look at these two comparisons carefully. So this is what is the information that is coming directly out of the production process, right? Directly out of production process. Nothing extra market price or anything like that we have considered. Now come to the consumption part of it. These two individuals are producing these two goods and now want to have consumption. If they are not agreeing to trade or if they don't trade, then whichever point they will be choosing on their PPS, that will not only be their production points but also their consumption points. Correct? These two individuals are producing these two goods as well as deriving utility by consuming these two goods. So if these two individuals are not trading amongst themselves, then the production point would be exactly equals to their consumption point, right? Any questions from anyone regarding this? Any doubts? Okay. Now, so now the question is that given the relative price of the two goods for these two individuals, can we actually have a trade between these two individuals for better consumption outcomes for these two individuals? Take a look at good X, for instance. The price of good X for individual 1 is cheaper than individual 2. Correct. The relative price for good X is actually lesser for individual 1 as compared to individual 2. So individual 1 can actually sell these extra units, or it is beneficial for individual 2 to actually buy good X from individual 1 rather than producing it for himself. On the other hand, for good Y, the relative price for good Y is lesser for individual 2. So it would be beneficial for individual 1 to buy the good from individual 2 rather than producing it for himself. Correct? Less expenditure. Is the idea making sense to all of you? Understand the trade that can take place. The kind of trade is nothing but we are talking of a kind of exchange. कि क्या करने से आपका इंडिविजुअल का कंजम्पशन और बेटर होगा या अपॉर्चुनिटी बेटर मिलेगा. Now think of this scenario. That's why I wrote these two comparisons side by side. Consider good X first. The price for individual 1 is 1 and the price for individual 2 is 2. So individual 2 can see that if I buy good X from individual 1, I can get it at a cheaper rate than it would cost me to produce it. Therefore, it's beneficial for me to produce lesser unit of good X and buy more from individual 1. Correct? So the trade that would emerge is individual 2 would want to buy good X from individual 1. Coming to the other way around, for good Y, we can see that the relative price for good Y is lesser for individual 2. So individual 1 might think that instead of me trying to produce good Y and sacrifice good X, it would be cheaper for me to get it from good 2, individual 2, and save money and get higher consumption. Right? Is it making sense to all of you? Any questions from anyone? Okay. So I think all of you can understand this. Therefore, the point is that we answer, therefore, for good X, individual 2 would want to purchase cheaper X from individual 1. And for good Y, individual 1 would want to purchase cheaper Y from individual 2. Correct. Therefore, the pattern of trade that we can see from here is that if I can just draw a small diagram, maybe individual 1 over here, individual 2 over here. Individual 2 would buy X from individual 1 and individual 1 would buy good Y from individual 2. This is the pattern of trade between the two individuals. Correct. Now the question is, the most important question is this trade, or you might even say exchange, beneficial for both? What do you think? Any guess? What is happening over here?
Yes, sir, I think so. It is beneficial for both.
Okay, all right. Uh, Ankit, maybe if you can just give me maybe some reason as to why do you think so? Any rough reason
Yeah,
will also do.
yeah. For here, uh, means we can have a beneficiary for each of the goods. Mean in good X, uh, the individual 2 is buying from individual 1, right?
Yeah,
So there the individual 1 is gaining the benefits, and in good Y, the individual 2 individual one is burning, having the benefit. Individual two is having the benefit from individual one, right?
Okay, yeah,
So in for both of the goods, both of them are benefited.
okay. Let me just add on one more line to, yeah, I got it, Ankit. What you said
Mm.
makes perfect sense. Just one more line in addition. And I think if the same, I'm just mentioning it for good X, and maybe we can have a similar interpretation for good Y. Look at the numbers once more for good X in particular. The pattern of trade that we got for good X is individual 2 will purchase cheaper X from individual 1. What will happen to individual 2 in that case? If you look at this, individual 2 purchases good X because it is cheaper to purchase from individual 1, right? His relative price is 2 and individual 1's relative price was 1. So that means he would have to sacrifice 2 units of Y to produce 1 extra unit of X. On the other hand, if he buys it from individual 1, how many units of Y he has to sacrifice? Anyone? If you can understand what I just asked. If he produces himself to produce an extra unit of X, he needs to sacrifice 2 units of Y. But if he purchases the same from individual 1, how many units of Y he needs to sacrifice? Anyone?
Sir, half.
1. I'm talking of good X. Only good X. Let me repeat it once. Maybe it's getting a little confusing. We are focusing only on good X. Only look at the left part. Ignore the right part. The pattern of trade that I just wrote down on the screen says that individual 2 would purchase cheaper X from individual 1. How is it cheaper? Look at the figures that you have. Relative price for individual 2 is 2. What does it mean? To produce an extra unit of good X, individual 2 would have to sacrifice 2 units of Y. Correct? However, if individual 2 decides to, instead of producing it himself, if he decides to purchase it from individual 1, how many units of Y he would have to sacrifice? 1. Because for individual 1, the relative price of good X is 1. If you give him one additional unit of Y, he would be happily giving you one additional unit of X because that is his relative price. So instead of sacrificing 2 units of Y to get an additional X, he can get it by sacrificing 1 unit of Y. Therefore, for his consumption purpose, he is left over with extra units of Y by trading it. And that is the consumption benefit that he's getting. Is it clear to all of you? I'll just request all of you to reply with a yes or a no if you understood this.
Yes, sir.
Just look at the figures. Nothing else. Just looking at the figures. Okay, so the crux
सर
of the matter is, yes, Ankit?
सर मेरा एक क्वेश्चन है यहाँ पर। तो यहाँ पर हम लोग जो इंडिविजुअल टू है गुड हिक्स के हिसाब से देख रहे हैं। तो
Yes.
इंडिविजुअल जो टू है उसका रिलेटिव प्राइस घट रहा है इस ट्रेड की वजह से।
Yes, exactly. उसको अगर खुद से प्रोड्यूस करना होता तो उसको 2
हम्म,
यूनिट्स ऑफ वाई लग जाते, बट अगर वो
हम्म,
इंडिविजुअल 1 से खरीद लेता है तो उसका 1 यूनिट ऑफ वाई देने से ही चल जाएगा। तो जो 1 यूनिट ऑफ वाई उसको नहीं देना पड़ा, उस वो अपने पास रख
हम्म,
लिया। So that
हम्म,
extra unit of Y that he's saving is adding to his consumption benefit. Correct.
हाँ
So
हाँ
now you have an extra unit of X and an extra unit of Y, isn't it? That is how the thing
हाँ
is. So that is
and
becoming his benefit.
my question
So,
my question is what is about individual one in this case means what is the term of their trade is this
in
any is there any significance
no 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 no
एक
no no. Just hold on, Ankit. Just
ओके
hold on. ट्रेड का बेनिफिट आपको दोनों तरफ से मिलना चाहिए, राइट? इंडिविजुअल 1 और 2 दोनों अगर ओवरऑल बेनिफिटेड नहीं होंगे, then there will be no trade between these two people. That's the first economic rationality thing that we are talking about. Now, the thing that I'm stating is individual 2 को benefit good X के through से मिल रहा है because he is able to get that at a cheaper rate. और इंडिविजुअल वन को एक्स्ट्रा बेनिफिट गुड वाई के थ्रू से मिल रहा है. Okay, it need not be something
Okay.
like individual one is benefiting both on good x and both on and y, and individual two is also benefiting both on good x and good y. Okay, think of this like over here, since you all don't have it in your syllabus, I'm not writing the utility functions and stuff like that. The utility of the two individuals depends upon the consumption of good x and consumption of good y. So
Hmm.
they both the individuals are interested in knowing कि अगर मैं जितना प्रोड्यूस कर रहा हूँ वो अगर मैं कंज्यूम कर लेता हूँ तो मेरा कितना यूटिलिटी होगा. If I participate in this kind of a trade pattern that we are talking about, then मेरा कितना यूटिलिटी होगा. If the post trade utility is lesser than my without trade utility, then which one will the individual go for to trade? Correct.
Okay.
That's what we are doing.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not
Okay.
writing any
Okay.
functional things or anything as such because that's not the way you will be asked questions in your exams. That's the only reason. Since that's why we are trying to only understand it with numbers and figures or whatever you say, graph numbers. कि होना क्या चाहिए? Given a rational scenario, होना क्या चाहिए? अगर आपका good x अगर आप दोबारा देखते हो, then individual two would be left with an additional y, right? जो उसको सैक्रिफाइस
Hmm.
करना चाहता अगर वो खुद प्रोड्यूस करता एक्स, बट अगर वो इंडिविजुअल वन से ले लिया तो उसको सैक्रिफाइस नहीं करना पड़ा. सो ही हैज एन एक्स्ट्रा यूनिट
Hmm.
ऑफ वाई. So that is adding to his consumption. Right? So
Hmm.
that will give him higher utility. So that means for individual two, trade becomes beneficial through the extra Y that he's saving up, so to say, or that he does not have to sacrifice, so to say. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. That's the essential idea that we are wanting to say, that do we at all engage in trade. So that's the individual, and if we are engaging in trade, then what is the pattern of trade that we are talking about? Any other questions from anyone? Okay, now let me just write this entire thing. Now if all of you have understood this, can someone explain the logic for good y as well, that individual one is purchasing good y from individual two? What is the benefit that he's getting? How much is the benefit? Just by looking at these two numbers, 1.5. Can anyone tell me that? At least to try. If you
Sir,
understood,
half.
Sir,
half was
his
it?
relative price would be reduced to half.
Yes. As a result of which, what will happen, Diksha? He would have to give up lesser amount of X, right?
Yeah.
Because the relative price that we have mentioned for good Y are in terms of good X. Correct. One means what? To get one additional y, you need to sacrifice 1x. And half means to get one additional y, you need to sacrifice half x. So individual one is seeing, if I decide to produce myself, I would have to give up 1 unit of x. But if I decide to take the extra unit from individual two, I would have to simply give up half a unit of x. So which is beneficial? Half unit though extra y le lo, rather than ending up producing itself. So that is why individual one is benefiting through the additional amount of X that he's saving up. Okay, let me write this interpretation out. Maybe you all can just read it, and maybe if there are questions, we can answer in the next class as well. Okay, now consider individual two. Let me go the exact way that we spoke. If he produces good X, he would have to sacrifice 2 units of Y. And if he decides to get the extra unit of x from individual 1, he would have to sacrifice 1 unit of y. Therefore, on buying the extra unit of good x from individual 1, he saves up on 1 unit of y. Right? This is his gain from trade. Okay. And similarly, let me just leave it to you as homework. Maybe we need not write this so much in detail. Can all of you give it a try to write this for individual 1 yourself if you have understood the logic? Yes? Just give this try. Hopefully, you will be able to just frame the setup up. All right. So this is the pattern of trade that both the individuals will engage in, and this will prove to be beneficial for both the individuals. Okay. Now, one more thing in addition that we are talking about. Uh, yeah, this slope of the PPF that you have written over here, the slope which is the relative price of good X. I forgot the word price. This can also be known as the opportunity cost of good X, right? Does anybody remember what opportunity cost means? Anyone?
So, best alternative foregone.
Best alternative for one. Yeah, this makes sense. So basically, the interpretation is if you just look at this dy dx that we had, to produce one extra unit of x, you need to sacrifice 1 unit of y. So that's the opportunity cost of x. To get one additional x, how much of y you need to sacrifice. So the slope of the PPF is not only the relative price of good X, it can also be interpreted in terms of the opportunity cost of good X. Okay. Therefore, can you all understand that this pattern of trade that we arrived at, this conclusion that I just mentioned, is based on our comparison of opportunity cost? Isn't it? That is what we are doing. We are comparing the opportunity cost of both the goods for both the individuals and then deciding upon whether they should trade or whether they should not trade and things like that. So this comparison on the basis of which we actually came out to this conclusion of trade is what we call it as comparative advantage. Let me write down the term over here. Comparative advantage. Okay. Comparative advantage means here the decision on the pattern of trade between two individuals is obtained by comparing their by comparing the opportunity costs of the two goods. Okay, we are comparing the opportunity cost and trying to see which one is cheaper in for any of the individuals, and on the basis of that we are deciding upon the which individual should buy what and which individual should sell what. And another pattern of trade that we will talk about in the next class, just for the timing, if you can just keep the term handy, that is what we call it as the absolute advantage. So the idea of absolute advantage is that, let me just write out, we'll explain in the next class. So here, the decision on the pattern of trade between two individuals is decided based on comparing their productivities. I'll explain in the next class that what exactly I mean by productivity and what exactly we are talking about. But just you keep this term handy. We'll discuss with the same example that what exactly we are talking about. So essentially, these are the two concepts that we will use to determine that whether there should be any trade between two individuals or not. Okay. Now, obviously, one question then comes up is that, sir, how do we understand? Generally, you will be given in the question that how do you understand, so you need not worry about that. But I will also share another trick on the next class, that in case if you are not given particularly that compare on the basis of comparative advantage or compare on the basis of absolute advantage, then also how you can compare. That is what I'll also share in addition in the next class. Okay, anything else, any questions up till this much?
Sir,
Yes.
sir, this topic is of international economics, right?
Uh, Ria, the concept is there in both. Basically, micro and
Okay, sir.
international economics have this in common, so to say. Okay.
Sir,
Okay,
Eh,
sir.
yes, Ankit?
sir, here everything we have done based on the initial model, that initial chart we had prepared, right?
Yes, yes. We are trying to understand the setup based on an example. Because I feel
Yeah,
that if I just narrate you a story, it's boring to another level. So I can't do that.
yeah. But the thing is that is there any way that it works in as a function, like utility function or the other functions, where we can
Ankit, basically you are talking like maybe if we can put a little bit more structure to the story, right?
yes, yes, yes.
We will, Ankit. Like you are semester one, right?
No, I am not from the economic background. I just having idea for my examination in ISI.
No, no, like okay, you're preparing for like a master's ISI entrance exam.
Yes, yes,
Okay, so you must be attending the comparative batches as well, right?
yes, yes.
Yeah, so there we are discussing all these things. If when
Okay,
we are
okay,
putting like if you, I don't know if you have attended the Adam Smith's models and the Ricardo's comparative advantage models. There we have put structures and try to get a little bit of more concrete picture
okay,
of these
okay,
things. Okay. So the idea first in micro, what we are understanding, since this is an honors class, we are trying to understand the concept that why will the individuals trade? That's the foremost question that we all want to understand. Because if we can understand this at an individual level, then only we can elaborate this at a market level, country level, international level, and so on and so forth, right? So that's why the
okay,
understanding of the concept that we are doing based on simple examples, and then in the comparatives we take it according to their syllabus. That's how
okay,
the process.
okay,
Okay, all right.
okay.
Anything else?
No, sir.
Okay.
So,
Yes.
actually, I've missed a few previous classes. Where can I get the recordings for the classes?
Harshita, for the recordings, I believe you need to contact the person with whom you are in touch with the Saurav sir's classes.
Okay, sir. Thank you,
And
sir.
yeah, and I believe like I had already shared the notes earlier, right? The PDF of these notes that we are discussing in class that you must be having, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sure. All right. Anything else?
No, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, okay. So I'm stopping the screen share. So that's it for today, everyone. Thank you. You all can disconnect. Bye bye.